IG pic, no filter. You could get the no filter. I'ma tell her how it is, no filter. Shorty, you the no filter. IG pic, no filter.
Welcome back to another edition of the Hip Politics Podcast. It's your boy, Mr. Cameron Calvin, aka Mr. Hip Politics, aka Mr. HU, aka I think I'm in here with my doppelganger. No, I'm just kidding. We got another special episode. For those who follow me and follow my work, all there's been a pioneer in this of bringing engagement, hip hop culture, the music, the political, I would say political participation and political power. And as a young, it started off as an intern many years ago, a decade or plus ago, and as a young staffer who's still a child of hip hop, but was able to observe from a distance, and then as I got closer and closer to it, and a man in an organization that really set the stage of what it means to really involve hip hop culture, involve the essence of hip hop, the players, the artists, the industry insiders, but really give them a stage to truly civically engage, politically engage, and to really start recognizing that power. I'm here with the president, CEO.
Yeah.
Is it CEO and president?
It's president and CEO. That's how they put on the business cards.
President and CEO. Founder of the Hip-Hop Caucus, my fellow Howard alum.
Yes.
The one and only HU, you know.
That's right.
The one and only Reverend Yearwood. Reverend Yearwood, thank you for joining the Hip Politics Podcast today.
It is an honor to be here. I'm so excited for this conversation.
Thank you, man. Thank you. I mean, we've been circling it for a while. I kicked off by saying, like I said, caucus, and then I think your words, your presence, your image, your ubiquity, I would even say, in terms of not just being around members of Congress or leaders and so forth, but when issues come up, when the written word really needs to be there. I've observed from afar, like I said, for more than 10 years, understanding, like, even before I actually really knew what Hip-Hop Caucus does, I was like, well, I know they're showing up, and there's an artist in tow, there's members of Congress in tow, there's other civic and leaders in tow. There's Reverend Yearwood right there. As a PK myself, as a PK preacher's kid, I always thought it was cool that a hip hop pastor was kind of what I saw as the forefront of engaging in this space. And I'll be the first to admit you to start this off. Like, a lot of what I initially started, the seed forming in my head of what I wanted hip politics to be, and what we've grown to be and continue to grow to be, was just strictly off of observation. Before I ever worked on a project, I may have showed up at a rally or two, but just strictly off of observation of you and the folks that have worked with you and partners that have worked with you over the years. So I want to start by saying thank you.
No, thank you so much. That means a lot to me. It really does. It's important that we all understand the role we play for each other. That, I mean, hearing you say that means a lot because of there's sacrifices along the way. But more importantly, it's understanding that this is a relay race, and that we have to, and in this fight for justice and for our people and our communities, that we have to live and operate in a way that passes the baton on. And obviously, the work you're doing falls right in line for that. So shout out to you, Cameron, and to others. I mean, I was blessed the other day by the folks over at Broccoli City who was saying, man, Broccoli City started literally because of the caucus. And that's crazy. I mean, they didn't give me some tickets. You know what I'm saying? I mean,
Oh man, you better have tickets for
You know?
at least and VIP at that.
you know what I mean?
And
Y'all
VIP at
citing the cornerstone, then y'all need at least, give me one of them going a little, what are those things called? Those VIP spots when they have they can go sit in there to the bungalow. That's not a bungalow.
Oh, the cabanas.
The cabanas.
Yeah.
I need the cabanas.
Nah.
But no, I appreciate them. I appreciate you. I appreciate, because for me, y'all have a hell of a task ahead of you. One of the reasons for me why that's important is that for some reason I've been doing this. I've been in activism now for 30 years. Caucus is now 20 years.
20 years. When was the exact founding?
The inspiration date is April 4th, 2004.
Okay.
That's the inspiration. And there's a story behind the inspiration. It happened in Memphis. It was myself, Slick Rick. We went in Memphis, and the inspiration to create an organization. At that time, I had been working with a lot of other artists from Citizen Change and Hip-Hop Summits and Voice Your Choice. And they were all kind of operating Hip-Hop Political Convention. They were all kind of operating in 2004. And then at that time, it was needed that we needed to be more strategic in how we were engaging with legislation. And so that was kind of the beginning parts of how the caucus came to be. And then on September 11th of that year, 2004, we had looked at the Congressional Black Caucus in admiration. And we're like, man, we're gonna kick it off there at the CBC. And when we went to get a room to kick off the first Hip-Hop Caucus, they said we couldn't do it there. And literally was saying that they were afraid that there might be violence. And it was, as I always say.
In 2004, they were still feeling like that?
No, very much so. It actually was a blessing because I think that helped us not to be steeped in politics, helped us to know, to look to even folks who were in power. We had looked to a higher, and even more in the first caucus, to our alma mater at Howard University. And the meeting was, we went down there to Crampton, and we didn't know if people even show up. We're like, oh man, Crampton thing hold like 1,000 people. We're gonna do it there and never get it, and 900 people, almost capacity. And that was our first, that whatever we do, it's gonna be for the people. And we're not, and even then, obviously we're progressive. I mean, we believe in queer rights, leading, fighting for criminal justice reform, fighting for environmental justice, fighting for all those things. But we realized then that it was important to create a power base. And I think that's why the caucus still exists to this day, because it was steeped in power. It was steeped in using one's cultural expression, check one's political experience, and most importantly, it was steeped in the fact that we were going to bring. We had a calling to lift up the voices of our community.
Fall of 2004. So I graduated Howard.
Oh, I've already aged myself.
But I stayed in here a year, and it's funny you mentioned that time because one of my part-time jobs, like I worked at NIH and I was here, but I was in DC for another
Yep.
year before I went to Crampton was like one of my 3 side jobs. So I heard about that meeting, and until you just told that story, I didn't
Yeah,
realize
probably.
that was the first meeting.
Yeah, no, that was the first meeting. That was.
Engagement. I
Yeah,
didn't.
never forget. I don't know if Jeff Johnson. Yeah, we were there. Vine. It was just. It was an amazing. For me, it was powerful because and it was no anger. I got it. I mean, now there's a whole hip hop caucus and whole hip hop thing at the Congressional Black Caucus. This year, the way it works is that when Congressional Black Caucus kicks off for the 53rd conference, it kicked off on September 11th. So they actually kick off. I mean, I don't know if they planned this way, but they kick off on the 20th anniversary of the Hip Hop Caucus. So, I mean, I learned that. I mean, part of my background is that I was mentored by Dr. Dorothy. So, being mentored by somebody like that, my dad was the dean of African American Studies at Howard. So actually, I was on Howard campus a lot for that reason. And so he was the before Dr. Carr. He was that before that. So that's
why this is in the bones. This has been.
yeah. I mean, like I said, I think that I would say my steps have been ordered, and but it's because we have it's because our people are hurting. Like that's the most important thing. The reason why the caucus exists, and the reason why what it needs to do, is that it can never, ever forget that our people are hurting. Like, I think that too many organizations that our people have been a part of forget that key thing. And if you forget that, if you forget that even now there's children who are crying, who are hurting, who are hungry, if you forget that there are folks who took their last breath last night and we got to a whole nother day, if you forget that our people are trying to do whatever they can and you just use your platform for you, it doesn't work. So I think that for me, that has been the main thing that has guided not only me, but I think has been kind of the DNA for the Hip-Hop Caucus.
When you say, when you talk about the platform for you, but and our people are hurting, I think. Let me explain to you what I had observed and what I had seen. Hip hop, I think, as an art form, at its roots, started off as an expression of the street. It started off as an expression of the struggle of people of color, and as it evolved, and as you see some of the most popular music, and it's obviously hip hop is beyond just the music. There's the MC, it's the rapping, it's being a b-boy, there's so many aspects to the overall culture. But when I think about often what a lot of people get out of hip hop is this is a platform. It's me. Look, I'm the best rapper ever. I'm the illest MC. I'm the illest this. I'm the illest that. But I think there's something so profoundly hip hop about what you just said, in the sense that the point of building a platform rooted in the culture. You can't take that. That's not what you should take out of the culture in terms of oh yeah, I'm the best. This is this. It's inward. It was inward facing. I see often as what an organization like yourself, and like I said, in a company and things that we're trying to build, is that I'm always looking hey, I always wanted to take that CNN of the streets. You've heard that term. I was oh, that's what I want hip politics media to actually be. We actually need a CNN part of the streets. And what I think of when I think about the caucus as a platform, in the caucus and all your initiatives, it's like there needs to be a policy, a people policy push, a people first policy push. That's it. I'm sorry, the alliteration. A people first policy push, and I see from the initiatives you guys have had, your social media, rallies, the partnerships, so many different things. You're always rooted in that as a people first policy push. But one thing I have noticed over the years, and
Well, actually, can I say a bit about the culture before you go to that? So, our culture was created by policy. Hip hop was created by policy. Like literally, it was the Bronx Causeway that was built by highway developer and actually mall developer Robert Moses, who literally decides to create white flight, and in many cases decides to build the Bronx Causeway, which goes over the Bronx. It is in that moment that when the people who were coming into New York no longer needed to stop in the Bronx, which would create redlining, which would create poverty, which would create pollution, which would create just so much trauma. That policy of highways that literally, I was happy to see former mayor and now agency head Mayor Pete talk about highway destruction, but it was in that creates hip hop, because in that moment when those highways are built, those communities are destroyed, loans are not given to those communities, redlining is created, poverty is just enforced, crime obviously develops in that process. It's in that moment our culture is created. That's the 50th anniversary. It doesn't start with cool DJ Herc at a party starts of this bringing hope to that community. On that those MCs and B-boys and everybody else depicting the trauma that's going on. Don't push me because I'm close to the edge. The whole 9 yards. All of that is created. So the farther that we get away as a culture from forth what is going to is actually getting away from hip hop. Hip hop is created by policy. And either you shape policy or policy shapes you. And we have learned through that mechanism so that what you're doing, what I'm doing, what others are doing, it's literally the DNA of hip hop. It is literally the fact that if we don't educate our community about policy and how it has a ripple effect to destroy their lives, then that's the thing. So I just want to that this culture, while music and fashion and our coolness, our ability to be who we are, yes, we use that to overcome our oppression. But that's not new. Down by the Riverside wasn't a gospel song. It was a roadmap to freedom.
Freedom, yeah.
Yeah, they were like, when they were singing that, it was so that folks would know what they were singing, but everybody knew. That meant get down here by Riverside so we can get up out of here. That's what this is supposed to be. So honestly, yeah, we need grown folks music. We all want to have fun. That's nothing wrong with that either. But we also need a culture that understands how it really was started. And it was started because someone saw our community as a path of least resistance. And that continues to today. Everything that we're working on stems from that same mentality, that your community is not worth something and that we can just do whatever we want to do to it. And it is in that resistance, or it's in those voices, it is in that sound that then can bring down Goliaths.
how redlining created hip hop. And redlining, and for those who are listening and aren't familiar, redlining was the practice of literally building highways and toll roads and right through communities and black communities, that essentially divided them, created a ton of pollution,
Capitated, let wouldn't give loans to businesses, the whole 9 yards.
lowered property values. So in essence, even lowering our financial value, and financial resources in black and brown and low income communities. Well, it was, but back then it wasn't even low income communities; it was just the black communities. But and led to so many different issues. But one thing you mentioned in that people don't see there is that pollution. But one of is pollution. You mentioned that, and like Hip-Hop Caucus, and you specifically also, like I've seen you at League of Conservation. I mean, was it LCV? I've seen you at so many different environmental movements. Good mutual friend Michelle Mapson from Earth Justice. She's been on your show and always speaks so highly of you. And then I stopped so many opportunities there, specifically as it relates to environmental justice.
Yeah.
Climate, way beyond just let's fix climate change. Getting really into the core issues of that, how they affect the community. But I think, can you help me draw what was the inspiration, or what was that first time or that issue that became such a core of the work that you do, and by extension, and then also that the Hip Hop Caucus does? Because I would bear to say that the average person is not thinking, you know what, issues they're going to tackle and change. Environmental justice. Please enlighten us. I know it's deeper, but
No, 100%, 100%.
like, how that
Yeah.
came out, because like what people might go to criminal justice, or people might go to economics or music and rights, but for that to be such a core pillar of done for so many years over the last several years, and like I said, the things that you speak up about, people go check you out on social media. You're bringing awareness to a lot of different environmental issues and environmental justice issues, and bringing the culture along with it. But it's like, how did you make that connection?
Yeah. Well, one, as a movement, we have to be intersectional because they all are connected. So if it's criminal justice, if it's economic justice, if it's environmental justice, all are connected. So that's for one thing. And two, your environment is everything. If you don't have clean air, clean water, it's a tough ride. You may want to have those two things. If you don't have nothing else, you kind of need clean air, clean water. But for me, I was born in Louisiana, and I'm my community. My community is folks who are in New Orleans, St. John, Freeport, Monroe, Rush. So Louisiana in general is my community. Um, when the caucus first got started, it was tough. You got to have resources and infrastructure to do this work. I always say, no cash, no cause. You got some money to do. And
And then let me just make a pause here to everybody who's listening. Like the Hip Hop Caucus, Hip Hop Caucus work, Hip Politics. We just started our 501c3.
congratulations, that's great.
Focused on civic education
That's so
for the hip hop
important.
generation. We've done a couple
That's-
pilot programs. So I just say that to say that no cash, no cause is real.
No,
like you've
it-
got to
no.
have the resources
And it leads
to be able to.
it leads to a lot, right? It definitely leads to a lot because if you don't have the resources as an organization, it can lead to other stress. And we can get into that. But let me just tell you how we got into. So right around 2004, we started. I mentioned, and so we were working around issues around the Supreme Court actually, and communities around Supreme Court. We had a camp. Supreme Justice, and we were also doing some other issues around morality at that. And then in 2005, reality is that we didn't know we were going to keep the doors open. It was like, man, I'm not sure if we have enough resources to do this work.
1 year in?
Of course, 1 year in, yeah, no one, because I mean, you can go off of momentum. You can have passion, but you know, kids need shoes. People need to put
Food on the table, yeah.
yeah, on the table. That's real. People need health care. So you got to be a real organization. So it was tough. I mean, that's just reality. And I know a lot of people. I'm telling you, that's why I think. I mean, I'm just keeping it 100. Like that was 1 year in, and so we were thinking, man, I don't know this. We can keep this going. Maybe we got to do something else and keep it. You know, because this is tough. And Hurricane Katrina was coming, and it had hit around August 25th. It had hit Florida. You kind of watching it, you know, in that process. And so, and it had derailed. We were actually going to do some events, so it derailed the event we were going to do. And then it hit New Orleans. And for me, I mean, that's my home. I know the community. I was actually in D.C. watching it, and I realized that there were communities that were like, if that's underwater at that level, something's wrong. And so that time, President Bush was obviously in charge. The storm, people had with Superdome, and I never forget watching and seeing particularly black and brown and poor white people left behind in the richest country in the world. And days would go by, and I remember seeing people hurting. And I never forget that later on, the caucus was like, we are going to fight for those who were left behind. And I will say this to anybody. While the caucus definitely got its start in 2004, I believe, and this may seem weird to some, it truly became an organization after Hurricane Katrina. It was when our people died and we were fighting, I believe something fused. And I say that because we would go down there, we was fighting for people to be able to return home, fighting for people who had been blocked on bridges and stopped by police. Mama D, who's now an ancestor, I never will forget it. Mama D was an amazing, beautiful black woman with this gorgeous gray dreadlocks with the, you know, phenomenal New Orleans accents, calling everybody baby, baby, you know, that's what we do. So she stayed. She was the first woman to lead NAACP New Orleans chapter. She stayed because she knew, like many folks, that the people who had money, black or white, whoever, they would leave, and our people would be one left behind, particularly the seniors. And I never forget the story. What got me, which was Mama D would talk about as the levees were either destroyed or fell, obviously because the Ninth War was destroyed, but then the French Quarter survived. Mama D said that she would sit outside of her house, and her neighborhood, which was mostly, she was in her, at the time, I think her 60s, was mostly beautiful, older black people who had been the ones that had to go through segregation and sit on the back of the bus and go through everything so we could have rights. She began to see her neighbors floating down the street.
Dead. In the water.
In the water. And her and her son would go out there and grab her neighbors and would tie them to a tree so they wouldn't be lost. And she would, after a while, she was going to catch them. She would see these women and men floating down the street. And she would go out there and catch them, her and her son, and be tying them to the tree because those are her neighbors. And what people don't understand is that when in this climate crisis, and unfortunately, it's been this kind of seen as this predominantly white, kind of East Coast, West Coast, but the ones who are hit first and worst, who have to go through that kind of trauma, have to see your neighbors, your grandmothers, floating down the street. You gotta tie them to a tree so they don't wash away. Is us. And it was at that moment I was like, we need to ensure that never happens again, and fight against this process. We would dig deeper. We would find out that I didn't even know, there's an 85-mile stretch in my home state called Cancer Alley. Even there wasn't a Hurricane Katrina. They're literally putting petrochemical facilities and industries. They have it in Detroit, Cleveland, Oakland, cancer clusters. And the fossil fuel industry's business plan is a death sentence for our community. So then I realized that this is something here that was critical for us to be fighting for. Because not only did it affect us here, it was affecting those over on the continent. So climate change became this a key pillar because it was something where the reality of this whole process was our parents, they fought for equality. We know that in the 20th century. But with the climate crisis, we're now fighting for existence.
When getting that was a riveting story, and I think kind of harrowing. I spent the summer at Xavier University in 1998 in New Orleans, and I remember.
Xavier was underwater.
What?
Xavier was underwater.
Xavier, that whole area that I spent was completely underwater, and there were people. There were a few ladies. There was like two grandmothers in that neighborhood that took care of us and cooked for us and stuff. That both passed during Katrina. And New Orleans has an extremely strong hip hop background, and from the Cash Moneys, the No Limits, and so many other artists, all the DJ Jubilees, and so many different people. Such a rich culture in hip hop.
And leaked into the play after Katrina. So then Lil Wayne and many other folks from No Limit, Mia X, the folks were in there, Successful Five, obviously Dawn Rashad, who now works with the Caucus, many others were right there involved in that process, including Kobe. Shout out to Kobe Bryant. Kobe Bryant actually did a basketball game in Houston. So we were doing a number of things in that regard. So that's what I'm saying. Hip hop showed up. We always show up in these situations for our people.
So that's where I was leading to, was in the sense that I think on it just on paper, when you say like, oh, hip hop, this is a core issue for us. This is what we should be focused on. Like, oh, but I feel like once what Katrina showed that intersection between how a climate, environmental event,
racial justice
leads into racial justice,
yes.
leads into economic disparity, leads into all the things that relates to the criminal justice and the different crimes that everybody from the law enforcement got away with to so many other people that got away with, and it hit one of those, that burgeoning strong cultural touch point, like a city in a region that is so deep and steeped in hip hop. I can now it makes sense to understand like how something, I guess, so traumatic and so monumental could help kickstart.
Well,
Like I said, I would consider that at least as an observer, a pillar of what you all do
It
and
has
fight
to
for me.
be a pillar when people are sitting around in boardrooms literally designing our destruction. Let me say this. We don't know, and people should know this who are listening, 68% of black people live within 30 miles of a coal-fired power plant, meaning that when they put these landfills or incinerators or these coal-fired power plants or whatever industry around petrochemicals in our community, it is literally looked upon. They look at a map and look at a zip code and they say this is where the majority. So if you're in Africa town in Alabama, or you're in Detroit by the Marathon Refinery, or you're at the Shell plant, which is in Oakland, or you're in Baltimore, or right here in D.C., certain parts, they put things in those communities. That's literally in our communities. And why is that important? Because there's stories that come from that. Because our children have the highest rates of asthma. We now know that there's plastic throughout in our communities. Why is that important? Because it's affecting our communities the worst. We are finding plastic in the placenta of black mothers. We are being born with that, hardening the arteries. Why is that important? Because then you have children who are living in situations that I know of where 13-year-old, 12-year-old, 10-year-olds are getting asthma and they are dying because their parents are just like, I know of a mother who literally made a decision between, do I buy food or do I purchase an inhaler? This Russian roulette thing. And it's policy. And she chose, I gotta buy food. Because it seems nice. I don't understand science. I don't understand the particulate matter in the atmosphere. I don't understand how all that works. I don't know that I'm living next. I don't know I'm living next to this coal-fired power plant. I didn't know it was put in my community. I'm living here. I didn't get all that. That's the evilness of that. I know this mother because at that funeral I was there, and I remember at that funeral, that mother was so distraught because her daughter had an asthma attack and died. The entire time the funeral was going on, this mother is trying to get into the casket. That's the pain that we're feeling. These industries are so sinister that they are literally putting plants on former plantation sites. That's literally how crazy. Thank goodness to folks in Louisiana who are not trying to buy the plantations before they can even put the plants on them. But that's the mentality. Like the plantation where we went through so much trauma is the exact same place they're trying to put the plants. And so I'm saying to you is that more of us are dying from pollution. This has to be our concern, our issue, because everything is steeped to our environment. And so we got to connect the dots. So, I mean, in the caucus, we don't just do that. We do climate justice, we do economic justice, we do democracy. We known for getting the vote. That's what we've been doing for years. Civil and human rights, and then organizing within the artist community. Now, storytelling is a really big deal for us. I think so. Like what you're doing right now with the podcast, I think is phenomenal. I think that to me, storytelling is the next form of demonstration. So this is it. Like this is what we got to do to spread the message. So I think that that's where we have to go in our movement. Because again, what haunts me, Cameron, is that I literally thank God for the Hip-Hop Caucus as a vehicle to get out there and speak truth to power. But the reality is I can never forget the story that I just told you. I could never forget about thinking about my grandmama, my grandfather floating down the street. I can never forget about that little girl who died from asthma. I can't forget about our people who are dying in our communities. And if you can forget about them, then this may not be the work for you. This work is a work that we need folks who still love us, still want to hold us, still want to caress us, still want to protect our people. This work It's about doing everything we can to fight against those who want to put folks. And I think that the idea they want to put somebody who is not only in court systems but is a climate denier to further harm, that we can go from somebody who put a Scott Pruitt or Andrew Wheeler to a magnificent brother like Michael Regan, and those things are the kind of things we got to see because we're fighting for our lives.
Reverend, when I hear you with kind of that passion but focus for the work in yourself, for your, I'm sorry, let me start. Picking up at 5, 4, 3. Reverend, when I hear both your focus and your passion, as you kind of talk about specifically in that issue, and I look at like where we are now in a both, I'll use the term political environment, but just I think where we are as a people environment, we've been hurting. We've gone through a global pandemic. We've gone through what I think between the internet and social media age, which I think is like the big disease of comparison. The widening income and wealth gap. But then I think so many different things and pressures that are on us as people. But when I think, at least from a financial and from a global impact and reach standpoint, the culture, hip-hop culture, hip-hop community, hip-hop music, the business of hip-hop, the variety of artists, the global reach has grown to such a fever pitch. We just celebrated the 50-year anniversary of hip-hop last year. But you talked about like the sacrifice, and I would say the sacrifice, the focus, the selflessness, the people first policy that is required to be impactful and to really not just to do this work. Where do you see the next maturation of hip hop as it relates to civic, social engagement and activism? We've been a part of that from the beginning, so I don't want to discount that. I've talked about it on previous episodes. I've talked about that with so many people, but I use this analogy often when I tell people about hip hop, especially last year. I was like, last year hip hop turned 50. I do a lot of voter and campaign work. That's been my bread and butter. The data related to and the paid media, the advertising, the targeting, the understanding voter data to better reach people. Yep. And we always say 50 is what you start calling either a reliable voter or call a high propensity voter. And so I look at hip hop as like turning 50 started to make us, we've matured to a new stage to where we now need to be high propensity voters. We now need to be high propensity and highly engaged and more likely involved activists. Like we can't just, we're not in our infancy stage, right? Or ignorance is no longer, I would say, an excuse for why we're not more involved, why our resources, that is both the voices and the platforms, and the cash that comes with it, not just out of an artist's pocket, but this is a tens of billions of dollar industry. This is global. It touches every country. So we move the culture in so many different places. So there's the resources exist in our culture to be able to help direct and change a lot of these things and do this work. I'm curious, where do you see, I don't want to even say the next 50 years, but the next 5. We are in an election right year. I'm hoping one side wins over another, but I mean, if you even hear hip hop right now, people are kind of split and apathetic, either apathetic at worst, split depending on what side at best, depending on who's vocal and who's not. But I'm curious to like your insight, having been so focused on the work, so passionate there. How do we make sure we spark that, not just in the community and the people, but the artists? Like you said, the role of the artist, I'm pass it to you right here. The role of the artist is to make the revolution irresistible.
That's right.
I feel like I heard that on the panel we previously did or something
That's
like
Tony K. Bombard. That's her,
Okay.
her quote. The role of the artist is to make the revolution irresistible.
What does that look like in the next 5, 6, 7 years of how the artists, the rappers, the singers, the producers, the musicians, the artist side of hip hop, how do we make sure that they're focused? Because that next generation is focused and is passionate and willing to be able to push forward, given all the things that I kind of laid out.
Yeah. Well, first, shout out to Tony K. Bombard for that amazing quote and her work engaging in storytelling and culture development. What's important to know about this quote is that she says the role of the artist is to make the revolution irresistible. What she didn't say is the role of the artist is to make the revolution happen. So that means the role of the artist is to make something so exciting that people want to be a part, but be a part of what? And I think that's where we need to have, why we need to have strong institutions, and institutions that we can trust, institutions that are steeped in understanding this relay race of justice, and institutions that have infrastructure and resources. So that's the first thing. I think that we need to have, we need many. We don't need to have it cut down. We need as many strong institutions that we can have for our people everywhere. I think that the point you're making, since I've been around this for so long, for artists is, I think, I love our school, Howard. I love it. Of all the HBCUs. HU. But I do think that the academy has a way of making you not as fierce as you need to be.
Ooh, hold up. Unpack that.
Yeah, I think that sometimes we go into it, if you're fortunate you don't have student loans, but you're acquiring sometimes debt. And to do this work and you're in debt, it makes it hard because then you can't really, you gotta pay something off. And sometimes you then get into this whole thing about resumes or LinkedIn. And then it puts you into a position where you're then trying to be better than somebody else. In a movement or even a collaboration, we need each other. If you fail, I fail. I fail, you fail. So then there's different kind of mentality around how we approach it. We also sometimes don't need people we understand that genius doesn't work from these books, but we need to have sometimes what I call GADA, which is genius outside the academy. And I actually think our movement is actually missing our Fannie Lou Hamers in this moment. I think we have tremendous genius, and sometimes artists who are coming up, and we see it from different areas, but they're not allowed to be a part of the solution. And so we're missing our Fannie Lou Hamers. We're actually even missing our Ella Bakers, the ones who actually can find the Fannie Lou Hamers. And the Bob Moses, not the rubber Moses who built the highway, but the Bob Moses from SNCC and others who can go in there and help to organize that genius outside the academy, which a lot of times where artists fall in at. It's unfortunate that we wait for a Sexy Red, for example, to become famous and do nothing to help her as she's navigating her own life. But we're in a position here where then it's usually our organizations only want famous people, but they'll understand if you create systems where and pipelines, you can have artists who can grow and build. Not everybody's going to make it, but if somebody does make it, that's actually one of the caucus secrets, is that we actually work with a lot of artists and people. Like, we work with Amanda Seals for years. We work with Vic Mensa. I mean, there's so many artists across the board. I mentioned them because they're artists who people wasn't, nobody was messing with them, so to speak. And then they just continue to grow. And now when they have platforms, then you have them. You don't have to, I think that we have this kind of usatory mentality. So I say that as artists, we need artists, but we need to also cultivate. We need to create that gathering place, a place where artists can feel a part of. We need to kind of go back to what Harry Belafonte and Sidney Poitier and Eartha Kitt, Nina Simone, we need to Dick Gregory. We need to have artists at the table, not using them only for audience building, but allowing for their genius to be, and their communication skills, and their way of hearing. The artists also hear things differently. We need that gift. And then we also need to have we need to have these institutions. But all that needs to come together, and I think that we're missing that. And so we have a lot of work to do. The stakes are getting higher. I've just said a few things why they are, but when you then look at this, now people are looking at it, actually they see artists now who are, how can this artist go for Trump? How can an artist go for this person who's against their issues? And I said, a lot of times, you've done nothing to cultivate that artist.
We're only there to, hey, GOTV, please, like you said, audience building, as opposed to
So you can we're the experts. So all you want you to do is just come.
No, it's like, would you invite? What's an extreme example back in the day? Maybe you wouldn't invite an Albert Einstein to the tape just because it might not be physics or chemistry, but like, hey, can you just show up and read this one page? It's like, no, this man is clearly a genius, even if it is not in quote unquote the field you say. There's a genius to be able to create art that can connect to millions of people.
But we don't recognize that.
And there's something that they may be able to give.
And that's why we're not connected, because the caucus now has an office here in DC, and we're back in LA. Los Angeles, and so we are not cultivating that talent until it's too late, and we don't respect talent. So your question about hip hop, where's it go here 5 years from now? It's funny because recently there was a big battle between Kendrick and Drake.
Mm-hmm.
Right. I was fortunate to work with both of them. When we were starting, we were doing our greenings, our kind of green the blocks, and then this is actually how, shout out to Derek Perkins, who now is at Rocket City, the Hip-Hop Caucus met his partners who were in LA. We had Kendrick on like opening act because we were inviting. If you go to our site right now, it's funny that we're actually doing the same thing. And you go to Green the Block, when Drake was first coming out, we were with him doing the Campus Conscious tour. And I can go on and on about all these. That's the thing, and I still think that sometimes artists may not become, Mega Evers or whoever. They may not go off to become the Dorothy Heights, but it's also about planting seeds.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that where this goes as a culture, it's know that I'll say it like this. when the movement is strong, the music is strong.
Talk about it.
But when the movement is weak, the music is weak. So if you want to know where hip hop is in 5 years, look at the movement for liberation for our people. If that's strong, hip hop will be strong.
Man. That's a whole word. If the movement is strong, that's when the music will be strong. I think that's been reflective throughout history. Wow. I might have to quote that one. We clipping that. We clipping that.
You quote the whole thing.
Dude, we clipping that. We clipping that. I want to. This has been a very enlightening conversation, and to be able to hear and uncover some of these stories,
And I'm
and
doing
listen
this
to some of these
because
stories.
I can see the gift in you, and so I'm literally this more than a podcast. I'm literally just transferring to you, like literally, because our people are going to need you to be strong, and when you're going through your own stuff, when life is life, and you need care for repair, and you need to go through, but at the same time, God is putting you in a position so that people can simply live longer lives. Like that's real, and putting you, letting you create things with other folks who are geniuses, because we're gonna need that. Because right now our folks are dying too soon.
For sure.
So they gonna need that. So I'm just literally just transferring to you.
I appreciate that, and I
Like-
received that. I received that.
That's
Thank you.
real, and that's super real.
I don't know. I'm not as advanced in my interviewing ways to transition in the way I want to think, but I want to say thank you. Cause no, I want to say thank you because I received that. I'm joking in this, but in all seriousness,
No, I understand.
I-
I understand
I-
the joke. Cause I understand because that's like it takes time because then you gotta like read, you gotta level set. Even I do all the time. You gotta like realize a couple of things. Why me?
I think about that all the time because it's I
why
ask you
not?
as a person who have found and lead this movement real quick in a man of faith.
Yeah.
It's in your spirit. Like it's something when people say, "Well, what is this and what are you doing?" It's like, dude, it's not a thing that I can.
Yeah.
Believe me, if I wanted to do something, I've had plenty of opportunities to make way more money or do all this
I'm
other
sure.
thing, and to do that. But it is in your spirit. So I received that transfer, and I appreciate I so appreciate the example you're setting and continue to set. When I think about where I'm trying to build, and let me even say what we are trying to build on multiple fronts. It's so refreshing to see someone, but some place that has grown and made 20 years of roots But and we talked about where the future of the music and the artists that are going to be engaged and continue to be in the movement. And we're going to have strong music if we have a strong movement. We have a strong movement that's going to breed that strong music. I'm curious. I want to tweak. We do a thing in this season. It's season 3 of the podcast, and so and you touched on it earlier on the Kendrick and Drake, and to a lesser extent J. Cole, but it was concepted out of this big 3. We can go back to the big 3. Who's the best MC, Biggie, Jay-Z, or Nas? Jay-Z artfully was able to insert himself into that conversation. And all the way now to like I said, that big 3 conversation. And most people do these top 5, sometime the Mount Rushmores. I want to narrow it down to that. But I want to put a tweak on it for you. Who's in your big 3 of all of hip-hop? of movement music makers?
Oh man,
Who's your big three hip hop's movement music makers?
that's easy for me.
Oh, that's easy. Okay.
Yeah, I got all groups too though.
Okay.
Yeah,
Groups count?
Yeah, one is Wu-Tang. 2 is Tribe. 3 is Dead Prez.
Tribe Called Quest, Dead Prez, and Wu-Tang Clan.
Yeah.
Can you give me a little on each of those? Why?
I mean, I think their music is always steeped and just. I think one is great music. And I think
Because it's bigger than hip hop. I love it.
I get steeped in always trying to tell our story.
Uh-huh.
So those groups have been just ongoing. Obviously, I do Fight, Rest in Peace. I mean, then I would, without a doubt, folks I would add on that to that. If just the other 3, not the groups, obviously Queen Latifah.
Queen Latifah.
100%.
Okay.
Amazing. My first democracy campaign was Rap the Vote. She had the first one, but even before Russell and all them, she had the first one after Rock the Vote. Rock the Vote was doing that thing, so Rock the Vote. But it was Queen Latifah that did Rap the Vote, first one, and so she did it. She actually was doing her registration at is Lerner's still around? I don't know if Lerner's even still around. It's a store.
Lerner's the women's clothing store?
He was putting the voter registration in the Lerner's. I'm really dating myself now, but this is how far back that goes. Missy Elliott, 2.
Movement music maker is Missy.
Yeah.
Missy is one of my favorites. She's in my top 10, like just in general. But I'm curious to why.
I'm in front and behind the scenes, so I get to see the person. I actually took Missy to vote for the first time. We were in Miami. It was funny. This is before we knew what polling place it was. She came down. We were doing voter registration in Florida. She came down, got into her Rolls Royce. And we drove around for like 3 hours looking for a polling place, and then we gave up. It was like, man, we didn't have the technology. This is 2004. And then she came down. She was oh, Rev, oh my God, I'm not gonna be able to vote. I can't find it. I'm gonna call. I can't find it. We came down. We drove back into her condo. You know, she's a nice condo. So then we drove to the condo. It was like they had the polling place in her condo. So we had drove around all around, and then she was so nervous about voting. Took it so serious.
Hip politics, baby.